television sets are, it is always threatened about to herald an age of unbelievable convenience where all the sociability of going down to your corner shop to order the week's groceries will be replaced with an order over the airwaves, if you like, through a keyboard like this one.
Hey.
Hey.
Hi, everyone. Everyone, we are here with Johnny Fallout and Life Patterns. And of course, Jake from Electrodrome.
Hello.
Hello, hello. So how are you guys? How's everything?
Pretty good.
He says as he's shell-shocked from caring for a youngster.
Yeah.
Life Patterns is a 7-month-old baby.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's going to be the longest year of your life.
Adopted already.
Just
Previous
from
longest years.
I know Jake has kids. Johnny, you have kids?
Yeah, I have 2 boys.
Oh.
Yeah, a budding set drummer, trying to
Oh,
put a
Wow.
band together.
Nice.
Nice. Nice. Well, start them early, you know. Okay. So, last November, you guys sent us an article that was really, really impressive. And it was so in depth, it was so technical. And it's about the concept of open source synth wave. And the article is actually called Open Synth Wave. And we invited you guys here to extrapolate further on the concept. Because I'm pretty sure that some of the viewers tonight have read that article and want to learn more.
Yeah, thanks so much for having us, and thanks so much for giving us some space on the ABSYNTH platform to talk about all our geeky but somewhat cool ideas, I think.
Are really, really cool. We're all about geeky and cool, for sure.
Put those things together.
Like, give us more.
Yeah, I think it's worth starting with just taking a broad look at where we are with digital and music, right? Because when you look at sort of the evolution of music creation and distribution from like the 90s, when I was a teenager, revealing something about myself, to now, I mean, you have the most massive change, I think, of any creative industry, period. I mean, with Napster, with digital distribution, with DAWs, with I started recording on 2-inch reel-to-reel tape, right? And now those expensive all that expensive studio equipment that you may or may not have purchased is now, you spend $1,500 on a laptop, and more or less you have that ability. So there is upheaval, there is change, I mean, everything is digital now, everything. And honestly, we're adapting and innovating as fast as we can. We're changing the way we work, the way we promote, the way we record, etc., the way we compose. But we are not changing fast enough to keep up with all the technology. That's just a fact. I mean, life patterns, how do you look at this?
It's funny because I am more kind of not a child of the internet, but I was fairly young when I started using the internet. And so that's kind of the world that I know is the digital world. But like you said, it definitely feels, even if you're of that world, you're constantly fighting to catch up and to stay on top of things. And even as someone who has a career in like software development, just keeping up with software development and all the tools that keep coming out, it's nearly impossible. Like it seems like every week there's something new that comes out that changes everything, and you're
Right.
constantly trying to keep up and adapt and keep moving along with this tide that just never breaks. And
yeah, so I mean, the point that I wanted to get to, I mean, and we mentioned this briefly in the article, is that when there's these big changes in the way that artists or people work with technology, it takes a long time for sort of the workflow, for the way that you leverage these technologies to sort itself out. So it may feel like, hey, we know digital, but we don't. We're like 20 years in, or what have you. There's 500 years of harpsichord, right? I mean, like, we don't know what we're doing with this stuff. And so the example that I like to give when I'm talking about this is when there was a change in factories from the sort of the steam powered engines. Imagine this big factory at the turn of the last century, and you're making something, right? And you're using the steam engine to power all the machines. They changed to electrical engines, right? And so they wanted a big electrical engine to do the same thing. Well, it took them like a decade to figure out that a big electrical engine was a bad idea, and instead you needed a small electrical engine, and rather than a big one in the center of the factory, you had a lot of small ones throughout the factory powering different aspects of the factory. So it took them a long time to figure out that when you change from steam power to electric power, you can't just convert over the engine that you had. And so much in the same way, in the music world, you're changing from this analog world to this digital world, and you can't just use the same engine, right? You can't use the same workflow.
Absolutely.
And that's the reason why Life Patterns and I are so enamored of this, open source, open source idea, this way of working. So Life Patterns, can you, I don't know, share with the ABSYNTH audience, like a primer, right? What's the primer on open source from the software developer's perspective?
Bail us out. We need to know.
Yeah, it was so technical that I think one episode Jake asked me to explain what NFTs were. And
Oh yeah, sorry about that.
I almost butchered it, like the whole crypto world. And then I was like, you know what? We should bring in the experts. That's why we brought in Life Patterns.
I thought I'd better ask you before you asked me. That was the strategy there.
It's a preemptive strike. Yeah.
All right, let's do it. Life Patterns. Okay. Start from the beginning.
So open source. So usually when you have a company that makes and sells software, they sell what's called closed source software, which means you get software, but it's just a package, it's an opaque thing. You can't really peek into how it works, right? Just get something, you run it, and that's it. So open source, it's exposing all the bits and pieces of the machine, really. And a lot of the times it's building a machine from pieces that are themselves open source. So really it's all about everyone is able to look at the code, see exactly what it does, how it functions. And more than that, everyone is invited to change the code and
That's
contribute
really
to
interesting.
the
Like, because I mean, I'm American. I think Johnny, you're American, right?
Indeed, yes.
And us Americans, or at least Americans, are always about protecting intellectual property. And it always goes through a whole series of trademarking and copywriting and all that stuff. And I actually did not know about this. That this actually happens. Like open sourcing is a popular, dynamic in the technological world, and software, and I had no idea, because I was like, oh, I don't know, let's say Nintendo. Nintendo keeps all of their assets per se. I mean, don't quote me on this, but I'm just saying hypothetically, oh, they won't share that with Sega, would they? I mean, it's of course an overtly capitalistic approach, but
yeah.
But yeah, I thought it was really interesting when I first read the article that it all stemmed from software development.
Yeah, there's a lot of people in software development that are very passionate about free open source software. Like they do believe that is the way to operate. And you've got things like Linux, the operating system, that's entirely open source and free. And a lot of the tools that power the web are open source and free. Like a lot of the frameworks that are used to build websites, a lot of the infrastructure, a lot of the software that is used to power that infrastructure is free and open source. And I think there's a power to that even capitalism can't overrun.
Yeah, I mean, because even in art world, they're usually in the art world. So my husband and I we're 3D artists. We do a lot of visuals and 3D work, and not a lot of the components that we use are open source, unfortunately. We have to buy them.
Blender, for instance, is open source.
Well, Blender is
exactly.
the first one that's open source, but everything else, we use ZBrush. We have to if there's something that we really need that we can't create on our own, that needs to be outsourced. But it comes with payment, you pay for the license. But sorry, go on. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, that's a fair point. And there is the question of why. So for example, let me give you an example. So Facebook is really invested into open source software they have this framework called React, which is just a framework for developing applications, and it's one of the most popular at the moment, and it's completely open source. And at least my reasoning for it is Facebook themselves use React, and they are invested in React being the absolute best tool that it can be. And so a good way to do that is having that tool being used by millions of people worldwide, and having millions of people testing it and refining it, contributing to it. And not only does that benefit Facebook, website and just their business overall, it also benefits their status within the community, because they can say, look, here's all that we do. We are giving this away for free. We are invested in a free open source web. It's like social capital for them, right? And I say Facebook, every major company does this to some extent. Microsoft is heavily invested, Google is heavily invested. So they all dabble in this for, I believe for some of the same reasons.
Yeah, I mean, open source is started with, software, but it has grown into, other industries as well. There's an open science movement, for instance, where researchers will share data, scientific data, or work together, to figure out particular research protocols. There's all kinds of open source and Creative Commons, as a common license. So there's all kinds of assets you can find online, whether it's video or audio or photographs, for instance. Like some of the photographs that are in the article are actually from unsplash.com, where they have the Creative Commons license, and you can sort of freely use that material. So it's this philosophy of openness, right? And there's various tenets to it, but one of them is collaborate, right? And work with a community. Another is sort of make the materials available to people, prototype rapidly, right? And so you can see how all these philosophies intersect with what musicians do naturally anyway. So I mean, part of my at least my argument for this is that there's so many parts of music that are already open, right? The fundamentals of music, the way we understand Western harmony, for instance, that's all open. There's traditional melodies, there's chord progressions. I mean, if you look at jazz music, it almost entirely was a shared and collaborated art form that took from all different parts of other musical sources and brought them together. So I think the power in open is that you can iterate rapidly and create something that maybe you couldn't otherwise. And in this weird digital scenario where we're all kind of separate but together, I mean, it seemed like sort of the perfect way for people to to start collaborating.
I thought one thing that's super interesting in your article, and everyone watching this should go and look it up on ABSYNTH. It's a really great piece of work. Was the comment about the software that's used in music production versus things like MIDI WAV files, which are relatively easy to kind of share and manipulate. But you do have that current issue where I suppose most software platforms for writing music, the most commonly used ones at least, have proprietary file types. They're relatively hard to open up. If you compare it to something like, I don't know, writing a Google Doc where you can have 100 people writing one article together, it still feels like we're quite a long way away from that in music, or are we? Is there a blocker there, or?
Yeah, that is definitely an issue. There are some attempts, or there have been some attempts in the past at creating more universal protocols for defining all the stuff that's in a like an Ableton or a Cubase project or whatever. But it's relatively complex, and there doesn't seem to be a lot of push from those companies to kind of invest on an open protocol, and that's part of the issue.
Yeah.
Is it bandwidth as well? I mean, like if you had 100 musicians trying to record something at once, I'm assuming that would be like a Is that where, or is it just ownership from the platforms?
Yeah, I think it's just, I think it's mostly there is no incentive on just on the part of an Ableton or even Apple with GarageBand or whoever else from making a truly open standard, because there doesn't appear to be a real demand for it, because people kind of work around those limitations, by sharing stems or sharing MIDI, and so people find these imperfect solutions to the problem. And they just seem to kind of work it out that way, even though it's fairly a cumbersome way to go about it. It's actually interesting because there's this one thing that I found shortly after we published the article, which I found this artist from New Zealand. It goes by several aliases like Eyeliner and Disaster Radio, and he actually did this thing with the National Library of New Zealand to archive one of his albums. And I was reading that article, and one of the things that's mentioned there is, and this pertains more to like digital preservation, but it kind of touches on what we're talking about, because it's how do you store the building blocks of a song, like when you don't have like a master tape or reel or whatever. And he was talking about trying to go back to the files where, to the project files that he used for the album. And these were albums that were released like maybe 10, 15 years ago. And they were built on DAWs that don't run on modern hardware. And I guess one of the albums that he was trying to preserve, he kind of gave up on it because he couldn't get the project files to open even. Because it was just outdated software.
It's so outdated. Yeah.
It was like I tried to run this on.
It was on a wax cylinder.
Yeah, that
would have been easier. That would have been easier, probably.
That's exactly what I thought of when I read that part of the article. But so a huge thing on YouTube at the moment is people like Rick Beato, Phineas, going through their project files, and we can all sit in amazement at Billie Eilish doing 27 layers of vocals or whatever, and it is incredible to look at. But I guess that file is just a thing, and if you're one of those big YouTubers, you can probably get hold of it and you can go through it and show it off. But it feels really kind of restricted at the moment, and that's a really good example. Actually, I can imagine if you think about things that might have been recorded at Abbey Road 30, 40 years ago, I guess the building blocks of a lot of that either exist on tapes or maybe have been transferred to digital, but you certainly couldn't really see how it all works. It's really interesting.
I mean, that's a level of granularity though, right? Like you can export stems from any DAW, and then I could send you the 22 tracks or whatever it is, and you could import it. And Life Patterns noted in the article that splice.com has a sort of a way of allowing musicians to collaborate using that particular technique. Is that right? Am I articulating that correctly?
Yeah, there is some form of version control and collaboration. I'm not sure that it carries over multiple DAWs. I think it's still restricted. I think you still have to kind of run the same DAW underneath, but it is like a wrapper above it just to make sure that you're both looking at the same file and applying changes to the same file and keeping a history of all the changes. And that's already pretty powerful, right? When you're collaborating with someone on music, and I'm going through that a little bit now, getting my album mastered. You send files back and forth, and you say, "Hey, here's I changed this or I changed that," but there's no real way to keep track of those changes. You're just sending files back and forth with some text describing it, and it's already ad hoc. And if you want to go back to a certain region, how do you even do that? It's like, oh, let me look at all the files that I sent and try to find the right one. And that's really one of the best things about version control software, to get into something even nerdier than all things we were talking about before.
Get ready. It gets nerdier.
The version control section in your article was the one that was like, I had to reread that like 5 times to follow it.
So it's cleaner to explain it with text, because text it's just plain text. It's easy to wrap your head around. So imagine you have a document, and you're collaborating on a document and you want to make some changes to it. So you go on your machine, you have a copy of the document, and you change a paragraph, and then you send that over to the central repository where the one version of the document lives. That's kind of the main version.
Mm-hmm.
And then you say, hey, here are the changes that I made. What do you think about it? And then someone else goes in and they approve those changes. And then those changes get merged into the document. So now those changes are applied to the main document. And there's a kind of a ledger that keeps track of
There's
all
like
the
a
changes.
log that keeps track. Yeah.
Yeah. So the way that it's easier with text because you can go on any paragraph of that text and you can see who made those changes and when, and you can go back to earlier revisions of it and whatnot. And that would be a pretty cool thing to have with project files on your DAW. I have several times now made a mistake of not using save as, basically. Saving things on top of it.
Just documenting the changes. It would be nice to be able to. I keep opening files. I'm like, what did I do to this last song? This was the version that I hated. I'll open the next one. I hate that one too. Just kidding. But yeah, that's I think there's a lot of technical possibilities, but I also think that this idea of open is a culture jam, right? This is, as Zarina pointed out earlier, Americans especially think about sort of retaining rights to artistic property, right? Like that is our thing. So
That's our jam.
yeah, so it's a change. It is a totally almost polar opposite way of thinking, which is to say, I created this beat, this bass line, this MIDI file, this synth setting, and rather than just bury it in my hard drive, what I'm going to do is make it available to the world, right? And so you see this in bits and pieces. Like Trent Reznor released at least a couple of his albums, all the stems, under Creative Commons. Now, it was non-commercial license, so you couldn't go and remix the slip, right, and make money from it. And I think that was probably the, one of the last blockers that needs to go, right? But he made it available, and you should have heard, like, I think David Ogilvy from Skinny Puppy did a remix of some of the songs that you could go to the Nine Inch Nails site. You're like, whoa, all these artists, they were just like, hey, I can get the stems, I can do this, and it made it such a rich experience, right? And so you can sort of imagine, I mean, Retrowave has this reputation for drawing from the 80s, right? How cool would it be if you could actually get like the vocals from Wham or Freddie Mercury, like without violating copyright, but you could get these and build on it, right? So Retrowave would be a true collaboration with the past, but of course everything's locked down and sitting in master files that sometimes the artists don't even own.
That's particularly true of that era, isn't it? I mean, I feel like artists from that era where music was suddenly starting to make really big money from really, some very, very talented but very sort of contracted artists. That it really does feel like 80s in particular has that really kind of locked in feel to it, where it's very little you can do with the original tracks.
Yeah, that's true, and so I think at least what inspires me when thinking about you were asking Jake earlier in one of our Twitter threads, like, is this a real thing? Like, can people actually do this, or this is a bunch of BS, right? Like, is this just something
I was so much more polite than that.
Like, are you in life patterns just screwing around? It's like, no, there's billions of dollars in open source software. I gotta think that there is so much potential in an open source movement, right? But it starts with a change in mindset, and the collaboration possibilities that come out of it. like I think Neon Deflector, who we quoted in
Mhm.
the article, sees some benefits from open sourcing his music because anybody can take it and use it anywhere, right?
Mhm.
And so of course then there's a business model discussion which we can have, but we will not have today. But I have a lot of thoughts on that too.
Yeah, it's I guess with that massive democratization of who can make music, I think in some ways, I think like when Apple bought Logic, I don't even know when that was that late 90s, something like that, early 2000s, and made Logic Audio 150, that's what, 150, $199 rather than $700 or $800. All of a sudden, and then launched GarageBand for free. All of a sudden, like the level of investment required, I suppose, came down to the point where you can look at some very different models, and there, there's enough supply for that to happen now. It's not all focused around single studios.
Yeah, that's and just to drop another reference, I think Reaper has an open source component to it. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but I do think for DAWs, I think Reaper and Audacity might also. I mean, that's not a DAW. That's just a. But I think those two pieces of software. And on the synth side, I'm pretty sure Surge you can find on GitHub, just in terms of open source software that already exists, that you could build on. So I think the next thing we should touch on is like, how do you do this, right?
I was gonna ask you, like, how do you guys foresee, like, how do you guys structure this? Like, how do you make it so it's tangible and for everyone else, like me, to understand, like, how to even how do you create, the blueprint for something like this to work, and I think that's the logistics aspect is where I'm like, how do you keep this under control? Like, do you start first of all, where do you store them? Where do you store all of these these open source files? And yeah, please, but go on.
I mean, as far as storage goes, there's a lot of platforms for it. Storage online is free or cheap at this point, and we're talking about
to host like such a massive amount. Yeah,
that's it's. I wouldn't worry too much about that. You can
okay,
go
so
on
that's
GitHub
the easy part.
Yeah, that is the easy part.
That's the easy part. Okay, all right.
Life Planners, I want you to talk about I mean, you're doing this. Like your next, you have plans this year to release a couple open source. Like there's an EP, there's an LP. Like you're doing this, right?
I'm gonna do it. Yeah, I'm still on closed source mode.
You've publicly committed to it now, so it's definitely going to happen.
Yeah, we are.
I have bought a domain, so it's official.
Awesome.
I just need to do something with it.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
But
Nice.
yeah, I don't really have a very structured plan to go about it. To be honest, I want to start by just talking about what I do. But that's the first thing that you can do as an artist is you can share your knowledge and your experience.
Yeah.
And there's already a few people that do this wonderfully. The one that comes to mind to me always is Opus Science Collective. He has a blog on his website, and it just posts these amazing articles on a lot of stuff. He goes over his hardware and software. He goes over the motivation for different albums and how he went about making them. He goes over his process in general, how he comes up with the themes for his albums, how he writes his albums. It just going in depth about how he functions as a musician.
Mhm.
And when you put that knowledge out there, you do it because you do it because you want to give back to the community, right? And you do it because you want to help the people that come next, the people that don't have the knowledge that you have.
Yeah, and also you're building you're building tools and you're building new tools. That's
Yeah,
exactly what it is. It's like when President Biden asked the pharmaceuticals to, hold their patents in the middle of a pandemic to to share all the information, all the research, or to create, like, to speed up, all the vaccines that are
Yep.
needed to battle this. But I mean, those things are really crucial, and it's all building tools. Like, you're all working together to build the tools. Yeah, but my question is, and this is why it was linked to storage, is like, so let's say like 100 people go in and go into your website with all your open source files. So everything that they touch, they all remain in your hub, right? I mean, they all remain in there for everyone else. So I'm saying, like, it's just gonna exponentially keep on growing. So let's just say you have like STEM 1A version 5, and then as soon as I borrow it and touched it, it becomes version 5A or 5B. Yeah, that's the part to me that is like, I have a logistical question for that, because I also want to know, like, how do you even know what what exactly which version you're going to use and you're going to need. And then by the time it's done, you'll have like, yeah, like what you're saying about the version control. It's like, it's just this massive amount of information. And then I think that's always like I mean, I know in my field in design, we always run into that trouble where, like, for example,
Sure.
like we create, okay, let's say in shoes, like we create, like, 2,500 versions of one heel, with different measurements, like, different modifications in terms of millimeters. And we always like get into trouble in terms of how do you archive all that information properly. So number one, yeah, it's stored properly. Number two, it's labeled properly. Number three, you even like people actually know what they're what they're looking for when they dive into that giant list of archived information.
Yeah,
Does that make sense?
That makes total sense. It makes total sense. And
it's like
making a song is not a linear process, right? You go through so many changes, and
we're talking about like just the bass stems, like like there are bass stems that and so yeah, like those are definite. I think, like, how do you structure that? Like, how do you? And of course, I'm just asking. Of course, like we don't have all the answers right now, but like these are just like questions that like that pop in my head, like when I was reading the article, because it is really cool. And then yeah, I think especially genres like synthwave that always get criticized for kind of starting to sound the same over and over. Like there is a it does need to evolve, and it does require, like, in order for things to evolve, other hands are needed. Like maybe multiple hands are needed to get in there. To help shape something, take it to the next phase. But what's really cool about it is that, yeah, if there is a genre where you can really do this, it is synthwave.
That is one of the things that attracts me about the genre, is just people will do whatever they want, right? And they don't apologize for it. And
synthwave,
I did notice that. Yeah, I noticed that there's. I'm going to edit this, but I did notice that there was an artist that recently like took like some, what do you call it, like some recordings from movies and applied it in their work, and I don't know how he gets away with it.
It's basically, if everyone just releases as much synthwave as possible, it just gets buried, so nobody can track it.
It's like you need a special license to use that particular, particular line from a movie by this actor, and I was like, I don't know, it just blows my mind sometimes.
Yeah. I really
am going to edit that. I'm not gonna include that in the show, but I just wanted to say that out loud.
Just on a personal level, I'm banking on the fact that nobody listens to my stuff, so I can do whatever the hell I want. If I want to just steal from other artists, I can do it. If I want to
I mean,
the benefit of
honestly,
being
if you steal
pioneers.
from another artist and like, I mean, there's only so many ARPs and analog synths and like, so many settings that you can do, so many that yeah, like, it will still sound like, pretty much close or similar, so it doesn't really matter.
I mean, that's getting a little bit into like vaporwave territory, where a lot of it is, about repurposing other songs and making them new through recontextualizing them in a way. And I really like that about vaporwave, and I think there's a little bit of that goes into what we've been talking about, of kind of taking other things and making them new again. And it is that in itself can be an act of collaboration, even if you are quote unquote stealing from other artists and making something similar. You're still, if everything was open, that would be
Yeah, in an open
Yeah.
scenario, that's not
Yeah.
stealing anymore. That's
Yeah, it's
Exactly.
not stealing
that's
anymore,
building,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, in the NFT world, like, for sure, everyone always like bangs on NFT. Like I always said, like it always gets criticized and gets booed. But actually, one of my favorite things about the NFT world, and especially with programs that rose like Blender, you can really see like the application of the whole open source thing in a visual level where I mean, I can like I have my own group of favorite artists that I always follow closely, and I could tell actually what they've been using. And
Yep.
I really
That's it. That is
yep, I can tell. I can say, but what's really great is like how they use it. How they imprint their own personal DNA, their vision
Yeah.
into it, and that's what makes it really great. And actually, it's amazing. It's what they create is really amazing, and they're each individually all unique, despite of the fact that yes, they've been using the same tools and the same 3D files, and and it's nice to see it, and you can see that space getting better and better and better because yes, it is open source, and so they're just building on top of what's already what's already been improved upon, and
Yeah.
it's exciting.
It's like
To me,
you're lowering the barrier of entry for creativity, right? You're not keeping it behind all this knowledge that you need to have. Like, oh, I need to figure out how to make my own patches or record my own samples. I can just use stuff that's already there and just be creative about it. And I never really got I know maybe some people will make a distinction between people who use pre-made stuff and people that craft their own. I don't really see a difference. I think all that matters is the end result. Like if you make a good song,
funny,
who cares
yeah.
what you use to make it?
It's so funny because actually like I'm releasing a record in a few weeks, and it's getting like I have Von Herzog mixing mastering it, and then he actually told me, it's like, I noticed a pattern with your VST selections and your plugin selections and your synth selections and all that stuff. It's like it's nearly pretty identical between songs, but they all sound different. It's because it's in the writing. It's like the writing is what makes the difference. Like it's not reliant on the sounds. It's reliant on how it's written. How you code it. That's where the beauty comes through. But yeah, it depends on how you use it. Yeah, we can all have the same tools. It's just basically generating more tools, and hopefully they get better and better and more advanced.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Do you guys have anything else to like further expand on in regards to the article? Like,
Yeah, I would say, well, it's going to be an interesting year, 2022, but I'm very much looking forward to what Life Patterns is going to be doing in terms of like what aspects he's going to open source.
you guys definitely should spearhead. So
everything,
I'm assuming
everything.
and Live Patterns is spearheading, like starting it, and then I'm assuming Johnny, you're going to jump in and work on it and start like expanding on what Live Patterns does. Is that what we're seeing in terms of like
Yeah,
this is going to execute it. How? Yeah.
I'm not going to commit to to jumping on that particular project, but I will say that Neon Deflector does all this great space wave, right? Like I'd love to see an open space wave project. That's something I've been thinking about, and just because there's this, this sort of interesting possibilities that come along with this combination of synthwave and ambient and more spacey sounds that I think would be tremendous. But I'd encourage everybody to to take a chance on opening up something from your musical endeavors in 2022. So if you're comfortable releasing some MIDI, if you're comfortable releasing some stems on Bandcamp, if you're comfortable releasing the entire song like Neon Deflector or Life Patterns would do, if you're comfortable releasing some of your beats, right, as loops under Creative Commons, and I think just at the very simplest level, Bandcamp can serve as a way of distributing stems and loops and things like that. I see it all the time. I know the Midnight released the stems for a number of songs on one of their albums for people to remix in a non-commercial context. But I'd say let people remix it in a commercial context too. So I'd encourage, if you're even thinking the slightest of you have the littlest bit of interest, do it in 2022. Open up something. And see what happens. I guarantee you it's going to get really interesting the more people do it. It's a scale problem, right? It's not that interesting if me and Life Patterns are doing it. It's kind of dull and geeky. If there's 500 artists doing it, it all of a sudden becomes a lot more interesting. This is a culture jam. It's not about any individual.
Right.
That's a great call to arms for 2022. I think
that is a great call.
Everyone's like, are we going to get? Are you going to open up some Zarina drum patterns? I think that's what we. It's the drums we're all after.
Probably, I'll definitely look into that. Crazy drums.
I follow Von Herzog on Twitter, and he's designing some speakers right now.
Yeah.
Some monitors, and all I can think every time I see him
I'm the guinea pig. My songs are guinea pigs for those monitors.
I'm like, open your specs, like share them. And I'm saying that half jokingly. Like, of course he can do whatever he wants with his IP, it's his. But every time I see something incredible happening, I think, like, make that available.
Yeah.
Nice.
No, it's definitely I think it's a great concept, and and you're right, it is a cultural jam. It's not like a one or two person endeavor. It really works well if there is a large group of people putting this all in together, and that's why I was like, so describe the website that you're designing, like, for this Life Patterns.
All right. It only exists in my head right now.
Okay, like, walk us through the vision. Like, in terms of like how the functionality, like, so like it's
sure.
I'm assuming that you're starting with like some of your albums, some of your songs, and then you have your, like, some stem archives in there for open download.
What I really want to do is just start from the very beginning. I want to be thinking about, what do I want to do next. I have some ideas, but they're not really well thought out, and I just want to share that process. I just want to maybe write an article and saying that'll be the first thing. Just, here's what the album is going to be. Here's why I arrived at that decision. And here's the process that I used, and maybe that'll be interesting for someone else. Maybe they want to do the same or not. And this is something that Opus Science Collective did. He had a great article that I'll probably just link when I never write something about how he structure these albums before I even started writing something. And I read that and I was like, oh man, I wish I had done that, because I just went in on this album blind and I had no idea what I was going to make. And it just took a lot of time to even realize what I wanted to do. So that would be the first thing. And then just start sharing, probably on GitHub, everything that I make. So whenever I make a project in my DAW, I will try to do, as often as possible, try to export all the stems, and I'll probably have to work out a cadence to it, so I don't go crazy just exporting stems and MIDI tracks every night. Or maybe there's a way to automate that. I don't know. Well, hopefully there is. But just trying to keep as a detailed log as possible of all the journey that goes into those songs. And that's why I want to make an EP first, because that seems a little bit more manageable. Like maybe 3-4 songs to start with, just to dip the toes into it, see what works, see what doesn't. And yeah, I'm hoping that just by doing it, any issues like the ones you were talking about, storage and just making sure that the log is well maintained. I'm hoping any issues that arise, I'll be able to kind of stamp out. And the cool thing is everyone will be free to watch along and to offer suggestions and guidance or whatever, both to the songs and to the process itself. So there's always a chance that someone can come in and say, hey, here's a better way of doing that you're not using, and I'll be like, awesome, thanks, I'll do that.
That is interesting. Yeah, and then it would be interesting to see what the final products are from other people, like using what you've provided. And then they open those too for other people to
exactly
use. And I think that's actually a cool community. It could be a cool community, like similar to the art world, where it's like you have this open source hub and open source community that where you guys curate and talk about all the projects using the open source materials. And then another way of sharing, doing cool things. Yeah,
at the very least, I want to make the kind of thing that I would have loved to have. Like, I haven't been a musician for that very long. Like, Life Patterns is my first serious musical project, to be honest. And so I'm just going in blind, and there's a lot of knowledge out there, but it's fairly scattered. Well, when you want to find out, like, here's someone that's just starting out and here's how they do things. You can find out a little bit, but it's hard. You can go on Twitter and follow along with what people are doing, but that's
Or use YouTube University if you have any questions.
At the University of YouTube.
Jake and I got our PhD from YouTube University. Yeah.
I've used that a lot, but the thing with YouTube is, people are doing that to make money, right? Nothing wrong with that, but it's monetized and it's geared towards monetization, and it definitely feels like that sometimes.
Yeah, you've definitely got that thing going on where, obviously Zarina and I achieved our qualifications entirely for free without having to pay for any additional content. But that whole thing is going on, isn't it? Like, you get an 8-minute video on, this is something that looks really interesting about songwriting. It just about gets the interesting bit, and then it's okay, subscribe to my songwriting course for $150 and you can hear the rest. I mean, there's all that going on. And I think the other thing that's always tricky is a lot of it is around big successful artists or big successful albums. It's like, okay, great, this person wrote this album in 4 months. They hired this incredible studio, they worked with X producer, this is how they went about it. But actually starting from scratch, as you say, it can be really interesting to hear from artists, just how they even came about the concepts of their albums, started to put the track list together, what's the theme, how do they select the instruments, the instrumentation, that stuff, that level of depth. I think you're right, can only really be found on Twitter, because the other platforms, particularly Instagram, they're quite sort of they're too short really to dig into any of that. And I think you mentioned it in your article that the searchability and categorization within Twitter is effectively non-existent for that kind of that kind of
It
searching.
exists. It exists in the moment, right? Once
Yeah.
it's gone, try looking it up. It's
It's
terrible.
Yeah.
impossible.
And
That's it.
yeah,
Yeah.
and it's so frustrating because you have so many artists that will share their work in progress little snippets and talk about the
Mm.
albums that they're making, but you can't really go back after the album is released and trying to get a fuller picture by looking at everything in context, right? You can remember, oh, I kind of remember this track that he shared a few months before, but
Yeah,
to
there's
have that complete timeline of here's where I started and here's the final album, and this is kind of what happened along the way. That would be
yeah,
really powerful to have.
there's been a couple of really interesting ones. Well, I love following Mark, who does Fused on Twitter, because he tweets about 50 times a day, as far as I can figure out. I mean, he tweets a lot. But he has, I feel like over 3-4 years, I've watched the whole kind of journey, and he's getting really quite advanced now in terms of the stuff he does in terms of mastering, mixing, his production process, which has been super interesting. And then I know it's no secret that I'm a big Churches fan. They did some great behind the scenes reels of them actually all sitting together, just boring stuff like the file names in iTunes they had for one of them. Like, here's the original, here's the one where I did the vocals, here's the one where Lauren did the vocals. That was fascinating because it's like, okay, this massive band who are signed to, I don't know, were they on Sony or Parlophone or something? They do exactly the same as anybody else does. They sit with 10 versions in iTunes, and you can go back to the original demo. That was super interesting. But you're right. I mean, all of that was retrospective. None of it was, and probably heavily filtered through a marketing department as well. So you don't quite get the full picture. But it was a fascinating little insight into them, actually making the album and structuring it.
Yeah, going back to Eyeliner / Disaster Radio, one of the things that they did for this archival of their album is, so you can't go into the DAW a lot of the times, or you can grab the project files, I believe, but good luck having the DAW to run it or the computer to run it with.
Mhm.
So what he did was kind of the next best thing, where, well, obviously he exported the MIDI and the stems, both with and without the FX for each stem. But then he also has these screen recordings that he did, walking through each song in the DAW. And just, I think they're about like 30 to 40 minutes for each song, and just goes into detail over, each decision, over the history of the track, and where he did certain things and why he chose these instruments, influences on the track and whatnot. He calls it, I forget what it was. I think it was like VH1 behind the music on a budget. And that's just the coolest concept.
Like Song
Right.
Exploder.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
Yeah.
that's very cool.
All right. Well, is there anything else you guys would like to add in regards to Open Synthwave?
Ping us on Twitter and tell us like what you're doing so we can encourage you. Seriously,
Yeah.
we're not hard to find.
Yeah,
Come talk to us about it.
absolutely.
We can't hear you right now, but that's what it's about. It's about collaboration.
They're all like asking questions right now on the chat, on the live chat. Yeah. They're like,
What
they're
I
like,
really
yeah, how do you
wanted-
facilitate this grand idea? I mean, like, my head
Yeah,
it
well-
always just works that way, where it's like I see what the concept is, and I see how how to get to the bottom line, right? And it's like, and I always just reverse engineer it in my head, like, yeah, how do you organize this? And so how do you that only because that's just like, my background, and I always have to make sure that, like, when it comes to like a lot of information and a lot of data, it's like, how do you access it, so it's like, oh, you need something and you can quickly get to it, get to what you're looking for. It's not really very different from like how we're doing music, right? Like, when we're going through like some of our some of our plugins, like we need to get this particular bass sound, and I'm a Logic Pro user, and the plugin that I love using is actually Alchemy, and it helps me, like, It's everything sorted out pretty well, pretty easily. It still doesn't like really answer all my questions, like, or get to like what I want. But stuff like that, it's like it's more like facilitation of like, how do, like you have this grand big idea for Open Synthwave, and it requires a lot of people to join in and to be part of it, to really make it grow, make it really fun, successful, really. And then who knows where this will take, or which direction this whole concept will take the genre into. It's not going to be synthwave anymore. Yeah.
It feels like synthwave really can be whatever you want it to be, right? That's the cool thing about it.
It should be, it should be,
Yeah. It should be, yeah.
It should be that way, but yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, any other questions, Jake?
No,
we questions for us.
Yeah, we've had loads of great. So thank you so much for going so much into detail on this. It's been been fascinating to listen to, and
fascinating.
Yeah, just to get the extra context, it's been awesome. Really great to hear your thoughts on it already.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what's funny is the way the article came together was a pretty open and collaborative process.
Yeah,
just throwing that out there.
It sounds like it doesn't sound like it was written by two people. It definitely had one unified voice, like the way you guys wrote it, and I thought that was really impressive.
Yeah, thanks so much for taking the time to chat with us.
I don't know.
Really appreciate
Thank you.
it.
A pleasure. Yeah, and then we got a lot of questions after that article was posted, and I remember there was a thread going on by a couple of the artists in the scene, like asking for the technical and logistical aspect of like how do you execute a project like this, where everyone can join in, and I think storage was actually brought up, if I'm not mistaken. Or like some sort of like archiving or a directory type of function. But yeah, cool. All right. Well, thank you so much, guys.
you.
We have one more music video, actually, Johnny's music video to show before we move on to our next segment. Johnny, so this new music video that you have coming out, it's coming out in, you have a date? I'm sorry.
Yeah, we'll just say it's coming out on Tuesday the 18th.
Tuesday the 18th, and it's from it's a track from your last record, Cybertherial.
Yes.
And it's called Slow Burn. Let's take a look. Actually, no, that's the wrong one. Hold on. Sorry. Here you go. Did you direct that and film that yourself?
Yeah, you got to talk us through
Yeah.
that video, Johnny. It's
Yeah,
amazing.
yeah, it was amazing.
No, that's to be honest, that's I'm sort of practicing what I'm preaching here. That's all open.
It's all open sourced.
Yeah, I mean
Oh
the
wow, that's
all the
great.
footage. Yep. I just sort of lucked out in that the theme that I wanted of this person who is sort of separated from someone they care about and was trying to get to them like that. I found that footage. I'm like, oh, this really does what I need it to do. So there's a lot of crate digging. Like,
Yeah. Oh
but
yeah.
yeah. I wish I had directed that, but no, it was.
Oh, it's perfect.
Yeah. No, it did, and it's funny because that, I mean, in some ways, sort of demonstrates that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really, really cool. And so that was Slow Burn from Johnny Fallout's record, Cyber Ethereal, which is out now on Bandcamp. Make sure to follow.
I really enjoyed chatting with everyone, and hopefully there will be an opportunity sometime in our future we can do it again.
Yeah, for
No,
sure.
thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you
Yeah.
so much for joining us tonight and for elaborating further on Open Synthwave. I think that's really important. It's a great concept. I still have questions.
Yeah, I think we all
I don't
do.
know. I think like I have this big thing in my head. That's why I'm just like I'm trying to like process it, and I'm already walking through all the scenarios in my head, and I'm like, wait, what happens if we do this, or what happens if this happens? Like but but it's great because it it got me thinking a lot tonight, and I really really love that, and fabulous article, fabulous writing, and please, like, if you guys have any more stuff like that or any follow-ups to this project, send it to us. Love to publish it, think it's really great, and it really gave that nice techie dimension to the ABSYNTH platform. which,
Yeah, for sure.
which for sure, like, Jake and I and Thorson, we definitely don't have that.
Oh no.
I'll tell you what, I will try to implement what we set out to in that article. If I fail terribly, I can write a follow-up article explaining all the ways in which I failed, and now someone else can probably do it better.
You're not gonna fail. Come on, there's no way to fail on this.
I like that. The backstop is another great quality article. That's the worst thing that could happen. Is there'll be one more great article, but the best could be so much better.
Exactly. All right. Thank you so much,
All
guys.
right. Thank you.
All right. Have a
All
good
right.
night.
Thank you.
See you later.
All right. See you
Bye
later.
bye.
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 That was a lot to absorb.
It was a lot.
It was a lot to absorb. Yeah, I felt like I was back in school again or something.
It's great. I mean,
Back
there's
in
so
university.
many there's so many great concepts in there, like the whole social media side, the YouTube side, the DAW production side,
Drop production side.
the storage.
Yeah. I mean, I thought it was like that was my main concern because I mean, maybe I was looking at it a very different angle. I think from what they're intending, because I think they
Yeah.
were like just really intending to start from the very initial beginning of starting a project and creating a journal around their music project and then providing the stems. Whereas me, I was thinking, are you building a website like that has these are all the stems from the midnight and these are A B
Right.
C D C XYZ versions of each stem um and created by these artists, and then these are the it keeps unfolding, or it keeps unraveling exponentially. That's why, like, whenever it comes to open source stuff, it's like what you were saying, like, there's like 1,000 hands in this Google document.
Yeah.
How do you keep all of that under control, and every change that happens, like, how do you keep that logged and within a systematic directory that's easy to access and easy to understand? So that was that's what I was envisioning. Oh, it's like this big, like, website that has all these open stems and, you know, and
Yeah.
a community around that, you know, where they can share, you know, everything that they've created from all those open source stems. So yeah, like similar to what's happening with digital art right now, where
Mm.
there is that space and, you know, and especially in the crypto community where there's that space where all of these artists are showcasing what they've created using open source materials. So I thought it's
Mm.
really interesting.
Yeah, yeah. Yes.
um but yeah, so we're gonna move on. We get yeah, like I need like my brain to rest a little bit from that.
We need some
And
music.
we need some music.
Yeah.
Um yeah, so I haven't done this for Absinthe, and I should have done this a while ago, but and we have actually featured some dark electro artists in the video podcast, but I wanted to give a little bit more in-depth look, and maybe it could be the first of several series. And of course, it doesn't have to be just on dark electro or female dark electro artists. It could be artists from other genres, but I want to start doing like similar to what we did with the experimental
Mm.
episode, where we kind of went in depth with certain artists that you wanted to feature from the experimental world. You know, it was interesting, really, really cool. But uh earlier on Twitter, you and I were discussing like, you know, some new releases that came out, and then you mentioned a couple artists and I mentioned a couple artists. So, and it just happens that they're all in dark electro.
We're in that. We're clearly in that mindset. We're in the dark electro mindset.
We're in dark electro. And then they all happen to be kind of sexy, you know? They're all like, you know,
Sexy dark electro.
yeah, sexy dark electro tracks and, you know, music videos. But just to get started, first one that I chose to feature, and then actually we've showcased this music video in a Static Desires, you know, episode, which is the sister show to Absinthe. But I'm really obsessed with this duo, and they're called Mother Mary. And then, you know, sign me up to, you know, the church that they that they yeah, that they're heading up. Yeah. So they're called Mother Mary. Yeah, if this is Catholicism or whatever, you know, whatever religion that they're in, sign me up. But this is really, really cool. And this music video is really awesome, and it's called Resurrection, and it's one of my favorites. Ever since I saw this, I was completely sold to this duo. So let's take a look.
Don't decide on your weak side when we say goodnight. I don't wanna play with your life. It's the last time that we say goodbye. And we say, oh, I like, oh, I'm missing by, oh, you like it. And I'll go on your weak side, yeah. We're always lying. How I like it. I'ma make it so alive. 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 Fate, all desire. Every breath till I'm satisfied. I don't wanna wait on your pride. And the last time that we say goodbye. When we say, oh, like, oh, I miss your body, oh, you like it. And I know how you excited, always be lying. And you like it. I'ma
So that was Mother Mary.
That was awesome.
Aren't they so awesome? They're so cool.
Yeah, they are very cool. That's kind of really sort of tight electro sound where it's like hardly any different sounds, is it? It's like a drum machine, bass,
Mhm.
maybe one or two. I'm sure someone will tell me, actually, you know what, this is loads of different things, but it feels like it's just like four different sounds, a vocal, and it.
Yeah, it sound like they only had like 5 stems. And
Yeah, but
yeah.
and you can tell me I'm only listening on my headphones, but in a club that would sound incredible.
Mhm.
Yeah, amazing. It's an amazing sound. The vocals sound incredible. What's the look? Is that Renaissance? Would you say you're the designer?
Yeah, I
There's a bit
think
of
it's very
Renaissance going on
Renaissance.
there.
Yeah, yeah, I think it's very, very Renaissance for sure. You
Yeah.
know, and I love it. I love it. They look like Venuses, like come alive from a painting. I mean,
Yeah.
they're so beautiful, and and I'm just all over that video. I've it's like can't say more beautiful stuff about that
Yeah.
gorgeous piece of work. And I saw that, I was just like, man, it was so simple, and their music's actually very pared down, very very pared down, simple, tailored production, and but
Yeah.
the vocals, everything about them, they were just oozing with like that essence, and
Yeah,
it's
it really
very,
brings the vocal out, doesn't it? When the music is as simple as that, it's really,
yeah.
it showcases it. It's great.
Yeah, everything's everything's super clear and super sharp, and
Mm.
I love that. All right. So next artist we got is Eva X, who performed at our Christmas event, and she has a new song out called Whipping Girl that came out a couple of days ago. Oh no, is it a couple of days ago? A couple of weeks ago. And
Yeah,
the music
pre-Christmas.
video,
Yeah.
the music video is really, really, really awesome. I think she wrote and directed it herself. And then did you I think you had her on the radio.
Yeah, she's yeah, just one of the tracks from the first Electrodrome back of 2022. I mean, sometimes it's sometimes a very different experience when you're listening to tracks for a radio show, because you don't get any of the visuals. So I get tracks submitted. I'm like, oh, okay, this sounds interesting. And this is just one of those where I hit play on it, and after 5 seconds, I was like, this is brilliant. Such a good track.
It's such a great track.
Kind of,
And I think
it's original and dark. Yeah, it's brilliant.
And I think this is actually my favorite from her. She released one recently called Machine, which was really, really good as well. But I think this is the way she wrote this and the way she performed it is really, really awesome. So this is Whipping Girl by Eva X.
We're in the dark with hollow hearts, baby, when I'm not around. Are you looking in the crowd? You have it all, your living doll, pictures for your trophy wall, pussy on a pedestal. So you see me, that girl still dream, and your love is never really what it seems. When I'm free, I won't be your whipping girl. Breaking free, your whipping girl.
That was really intense.
The blood drinking did make me feel a bit ill at the end there, I must say.
What do you mean? It's just chocolate syrup with black.
I was too
color.
involved by that point. It was genuinely blood in my mind. I was like, oh my goodness, she's taken a lot, drunk a lot of that.
She did. She gulped a lot of that. I thought it was really, it was well done, and
Yeah.
it was intense. And then it was very dark for sure. Like whenever Baphomet is involved.
Yeah, it was great. It's a great video.
Really, really awesome video. I love it.
Yeah, and I love that track. It's a brilliantly produced track.
Yeah. It sounds really good, and the writing was great, and she sounded great. Totally. And next one we got tonight is Agnes, which is another artist that performed at our holiday event. She performed the Mariah Carey cover, which was really, really awesome, and it was
astonishing voice. Absolutely astonishing voice.
And she's actually coming up with a record on March 25th called Oneness, and and she's actually part of the same record label as me. She's part of Dark Tunes, and it's funny because we're also both Geminis. We're also both married to Geminis.
I tell what are the cosmological implications of two Geminis?
Right.
Also Gemini,
that means that there's 8 people in the room. Are you a Gemini?
Yeah.
Oh, you're a Gemini.
So there's 8 people in the room at once.
Yeah. I didn't know that you were Gemini. What's your birthday?
9th of June.
9th of June. I'm June 7th. So wow.
All right.
There you go. That makes sense. It makes sense now. See, that's why this show works, because there's a lot of Geminis.
So you're telling me there's 4 of us on the podcast at the moment?
There's 4 of us, yeah, for sure. There's 4 of us in the podcast. So, but what's really funny about Agnes is we both got signed to Dark Tunes around the same time. I think just a couple months apart, and also one on different directions from the original music or original genre we used to do. We both went into some sort of this like mystical dark cosmo like I don't even know how to describe it.
Someone please give it a name. Come on.
Yeah, but we have very like similarities in terms of themes and topics of what we write about. And then and we both end up writing a winter solstice song. So I performed my winter solstice song during our holiday event, which is also coming out in my record. And she released winter solstice song on winter solstice. It's called Soul Invictus, and both songs. And for sure, we don't really talk about what we're each doing, right? But both songs, my song and her song, they each talk about the love affair between the sun and the moon, right? And or there's reference to like sun and the moon, planets, cosmos, all that stuff. So I thought that was really interesting, and she released the visuals, and it's really beautiful, and she looks really beautiful in it, and her husband's also in it. So there's a lot of Gemini power tonight. And this is Agnes Soul Invictus official video.
In the night I'm floating out of sorrows. I'm surrounded by the stars. We are dancing now with us in silence, and the time is passing by.
was Agnes. And I thought that was so beautiful, and she looked really gorgeous in it.
Yeah, it's, I saw she did the costume design at the end. That's
Mm-hmm.
that's some serious headgear there. I think that was pretty remarkable. Yeah, it's great track as well. Great track.
Gemini power.
Oh man, you're not gonna hear the end of this now. I should have said something else, shouldn't I?
Gemini power. Yeah, see? You guys believe it now? You guys believe in the Gemini power. It's real.
Gemini power's real.
Yeah, it's real. Yeah. You gotta stop believing. Believing. All right. Next one is Corlix, a duo from Brighton. And she's actually American, and I think he's Italian, and they're actually a married couple, and they're so hot together. Of course they're married, you know.
So they're from Brighton in the UK, is where they are now.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. Okay.
And then, yeah, I think she grew up in Hawaii and then spent
Right.
time in Florida and in LA and then moved to Europe.
Yeah.
And then I believe she lived in Germany, in Berlin for a bit, and then moved to the UK. But she has a new single out called Take Off Everything. And I guess she takes off everything. Well, not really. I think we keep things like relatively PG. Like,
It's YouTube friendly, at least, I should hope.
YouTube friendly, yeah. You know? And this is Corlix. Take off everything.
Coolest boy to walk away. Hearts break off every day. This may be the last chance.
So that was Corlix with Take Off Everything. And what's really, really cool is that she did a follow-up series of a follow-up video with her putting everything on from her closet. That was really clever.
That was awesome, and more incredible headgear. I think that's the one of the themes of this week's Absinthe.
Dark Electro, like
Dark
actually,
Electro.
Dark Electro artists. They have we all have like this penchant for like accessories and fashion and which is why I switched genres.
And I love the I mean,
can
I love a
flip-
bit of I love a bit of like a sort of crossover anyway. Like, I love the fact that was like a sort of band sound together with the sort of electro elements. Really, really strong sound. It's quite punky when it started out.
Yeah, it's a very post-punk, I think. Post-punk
Yeah.
and dark wave at the same time. And also
Yeah, really good.
minimalistic, which is really nice.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was gonna say, like in this genre, you can really flex Gemini power in this
Oh no.
genre. I'm not gonna shut up about that now. See?
You can flex your Gemini power.
Gemini power in this genre. I don't think Corlix a Gemini, but maybe she is.
I think we better check, otherwise,
I need to check now if all of these other artists that we showcased tonight are Geminis, because there are so many similarities amongst all of us.
Not every artist can be born in June, though. Let's face it, or early July, whatever the date range is.
Late May to mid June. Right?
Oh, is it
Or,
late May
like,
to
yeah,
mid June?
late
Okay, there you go.
mid-June, yeah.
All right.
And then, and of course, I will be joining my Dark Electro sisters tonight by showcasing a music video that I don't actually showcase enough, because actually this is I'm very proud of this music video, and it's actually my first one, my debut.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, my debut track and debut music video, and which I ended up directing.
I'm not sure I've seen it. I feel
Not a lot of people have
guilty
seen it.
admitting that. I should have seen the whole catalog, really. I mean, come on, I've known you for a long time now.
I've been pushing I've been always pushing the recent ones, but this one's Silence to Surrender, and yeah,
Oh,
again, more Gemini, definitely a lot loaded with Gemini power.
Fully
in
loaded.
this one. Fully loaded. Here you go.
Feel me break right through the doors into false heat.
All right.
Epic
that-
performance in that one. It's so good.
Thank you. So that was from my that was my debut single and debut music video. But
Let's just talk a bit, right? So, because to film a video like that, you've got to have a lot of trust in the team around you, because you're really kind of you're like exposing a lot of stuff there. It's like it's like a very sort of personal thing to film. Just tell me a bit about all of that side of it.
Oh, well, for sure. Like I I mean it was the very first time that I've ever done anything like that, and I've never done anything at all that's come close to something that, that provocative, and
Mhm.
so um yeah, it took a bit of mental preparation,
I bet.
for sure. And well, I was writing the treatment for the music video, and then and I had a creative consultant who was helping me um produce the video together, actually. And then I mean, she's a pro, and then also she brought in a film, film team that were all pros.
Mm,
And when I met them, I felt really comfortable.
mm,
And also at that point, I handpicked all of the rest of the cast, all of the models and the extras, and a lot of them are actually my friends. The drummer in the video is actually my former bandmate. He was actually
okay.
my drummer at one point, and when I was doing the metal band. And then the actor, Jeremy O'Shea, is actually my best friend. We've known each
Okay.
other for quite some time, and he's a real actor, and I always feel comfortable around him. I don't think I would have been able to do any of those parts if it was someone else. Um, but yeah, as soon as we started shooting, I just felt comfortable, and I kind of went to that zone, and yeah, I went into character, and was just thinking of I was just adamant about getting it done.
Yeah.
Like, and, that was a very long shoot, by the way. It
Mm,
took, almost 2 days to get everything done and
wow.
working nonstop. Like, we just worked nonstop. We didn't really take any break, scene after scene. Um, and also, one of the largest production, just building all the sets, all the TVs and all that stuff, and a lot of
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
peripherals that went in, the costume. Also, I had to dress so many people in
Mm.
that particular video. I never dressed so much people in a music
Yeah, of
video.
course. There's a lot of people in it. Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, but yeah, but I wanted to have a strong debut. This is the first Zarina song, and I want to make sure that I have a nice video to accompany my single. And the single, actually, so this is the marquee song in my debut record, and it was actually co-produced. Actually, I want to say led, my friend Joe Pertori was the one who led the production.
Mm.
And he actually is a producer that I've been working with for quite some time before, ever since my metal, metal days. And I've always wanted to give him a song that he can really help sculpt
Mm.
the sound, the vibe, the sound design, the synth sound, that would direct the vibe for the rest of the project and the rest of the record. And then and so yeah, that's why I chose that song as my debut.
Amazing snare in that track. I think
Yeah.
you need to open source that snare immediately.
And it's actually I have to get his name, but I almost forgot what his name. But it's a mastering engineer from Sterling Sounds in New York City,
Okay.
and who masters Taylor Swift and all the big pop stars.
Yeah.
I have to get his name, yeah, and I'll just drop it in here. But yeah, and it was also like the first time that I got to work with like a real big pro, who for sure I didn't really know so much about production at that around that time when we were producing that record. It was my first time downloading Logic and learning all the presets and all the plugins and
So this time you were more of an artist without the production expertise rather than a producer. And
yeah,
an
it's kind of like more like the writer, the artist.
Yeah.
Like I had the foundations and the structures of the demos,
Mhm.
and then work with Joe on really putting the colors into the sound design.
Yeah.
And and the rest, basically, the rest of the songs, after learning from him and after learning from a few friends, I basically I kind of did it myself, and then just hired a mixing engineer to mix it all, because I hate mixing. But yeah, the rest has been produced by me. But that was the first record that was that I was still kind of finding my way through the whole magic and whole world of digital music making.
Yeah. Yeah.
But there you go, there's our dark electro segment.
That was awesome.
And I wish I've done this earlier, because it is a genre that I belong to this group, so I'm really passionate about it, and I just want to show the beauty and also how varied it is. Everyone sounds different, everyone has their own unique vibe, but there's still something that kind of ties all of us together, which I really like. And for sure, aesthetics and all of that is really, really important in this genre. But there's that vibe, there's that that lush vibe always, that's across most of dark electro,
Yeah,
at
definitely.
least. All right, any final words, Jake? I think that's it.
Yeah, just thanks to Johnny and Paolo. That was amazing to talk through all that in so much detail, and just to get their thoughts, really. And it's one of those things that I think just opened my eyes to a lot of constraints that currently exist in music, a lot of things that could be unconstrained, a lot of different ways of working. Super interesting. So yeah, that was great, and always a treat to play some dark electro. I think we'll have to do a dark electro too at some point. I'm gonna have a little think now if I can.
We focus on the ladies tonight. We're gonna focus on the dudes next time.
Dark electro dudes. Oh god.
Yeah. Dark electro dudes. Yeah. Let's see. Yeah, and also other genres that are in the electronic music world that we don't really dive into too often, but now starting to. So, all right, guys. Good night. Thank you for joining us. And Jake, any last final words for our audience?
Yeah, thanks so much for joining us. Great to be on the road again with season 2 and lots more to come.
Baby, Let me taste you. Let me have you. Let me take you. Let me feel you. Let me